The morning air of my wedding day was supposed to be filled with the scent of lilies and the soft hum of happy anticipation. And it was, for a while. Sunlight streamed through the large window of the bridal suite, catching the dust motes as they danced in the air, each one a tiny, glittering promise of the magic to come. My maid of honor, my sister Chloe, was arranging the champagne flutes on a small table, her movements light and joyful. Everything was exactly as I had pictured it 1,000 times. Everything, except for the knot of dread that had been tightening in my stomach since the moment I woke up. The source of that dread had a name: Catherine, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. From the moment Liam slipped a ring on my finger, Catherine had viewed our relationship not as a union of love, but as a hostile takeover of her son. She was a woman carved from ice. Her compliments always double-edged, her smiles never quite reaching her cold, calculating eyes. She had contested every choice, from the flavor of the cake to the font on the invitations. But her most pointed criticism had been reserved for my wedding dress. It wasn't a designer gown worth thousands of dollars. It was something far more precious. It had been my mother's, worn on the day she married my father. It was a classic A-line, made of ivory lace that had softened to the color of old cream, with delicate pearl buttons running down the back. My mother passed away when I was 16, and wearing her dress felt like having a piece of her with me. Her arms wrapped around me as I walked toward my future. When I first showed it to Catherine, her lips had thinned into a severe line. "It's vintage," she'd said, the word dripping with disdain. Quaint. I had hoped for something a little more contemporary for Liam's wedding. I had ignored her, just as I had ignored all her other barbs. Liam, bless his heart, was often oblivious to his mother's subtle brand of cruelty. He saw her as firm but loving, and for his sake, I tried to see it too. I told myself that today, of all days, Catherine would put her animosity aside. Today was about love. Surely even she could not tarnish that. "It's time, Eleanor," Chloe sang, her voice pulling me from my thoughts. "Time to put on the masterpiece." My heart gave a little flutter of excitement, momentarily pushing the anxiety away. We walked over to the tall armoire where the dress was hanging, protected in a white garment bag. I took a deep, steadying breath, picturing my father's face when he would see me, picturing Liam waiting at the altar. I unzipped the bag. The air rushed out of my lungs. For a moment, my brain simply couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. The bottom of the dress, the beautiful floor-sweeping hem that my mother had glided in, was gone. It hadn't been neatly hemmed. It had been hacked. Jagged, uneven cuts, like a wild animal had torn at it, ran all the way around the base. The delicate lace was shredded, the silk lining butchered. It was a violation, a desecration. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Eleanor! What? Who?" But I knew who. There was only one person who despised this dress enough, who was cruel enough to do something so monstrous. A cold, sharp certainty pierced through my shock. Catherine had been here. She had stopped by earlier in the morning, claiming she had forgotten her corsage in the room. I had been in the shower. Chloe had let her in, and we hadn't thought a thing of it. She must have done it then, a swift, vicious act of destruction in the few moments she was alone. My knees felt weak, and I gripped the armoire for support. The scent of lilies suddenly seemed cloying, sickening. The sunlight felt like a mockery. My wedding day, the day I was supposed to feel wrapped in my mother's love, had been deliberately and hatefully shredded, just like the hem of her dress. Chloe rushed to my side, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. "We can fix this," she said, her voice trembling, though she was clearly trying to be the strong one. We can pin it. Maybe fold it under. No one will notice from a distance." I shook my head, a single, hot tear finally breaking free and tracing a path down my cheek. I touched the mangled fabric. It was coarse and sharp against my fingertips. "No," I whispered, the word feeling like broken glass in my throat. "Look at it, Chloe. It's ruined." She wanted it to be ruined. The cruelty was so precise, so personal. This wasn't just an attack on a dress. It was an attack on my mother's memory. It was Catherine's way of cutting my mother out of this day, of erasing her presence entirely. The despair was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. All the joy, all the excitement I'd felt, evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache. My first instinct was to call Liam, to scream and cry and tell him what his mother had done. But what would he do? He would confront her, of course, but she would deny it. She would feign shock and horror, perhaps even shed a crocodile tear, and paint me as a hysterical, over-emotional bride. Liam, who desperately wanted peace, would be caught in the middle, and the day would dissolve into a swamp of accusations and bitterness. Catherine would have won. She would have successfully turned our wedding day into a disaster. My second instinct was even more powerful: to call the whole thing off. How could I marry him? How could I join a family with a matriarch who was capable of such venom? I sank onto the small velvet stool, the mutilated dress pooling at my feet like a fallen cloud. Chloe was already on the phone, her voice a hushed, frantic whisper, likely calling my father to break the news. I could see my reflection in the mirror opposite me, a bride with no dress, her face pale with anguish. It was the picture of defeat, and that's when I saw it. Tucked away in the reflection, behind my own heartbroken image, was the corner of my travel suitcase. And in that suitcase, wrapped carefully in layers of tissue paper, was the other dress. The one I hadn't even considered wearing. The one I brought along more for sentimental reasons than anything else. It was my grandmother's wedding dress. She was a woman I'd never met, my mother's mother, but her stories were legendary in our family. She was a firecracker, a woman who spoke her mind, who took no nonsense from anyone. My mother had saved her dress, just as I had saved hers. It was from a different era entirely, a sleek, bias-cut silk gown from the late 1940s. It wasn't lace and innocence, it was elegance and strength, with a daringly low back and a cascade of tiny silk-covered buttons. It was beautiful, but it wasn't my mother's. I had packed it as a sort of silent tribute to the grandmother I never knew, another piece of my history to have with me. A new thought, sharp and clear, cut through the fog of my despair. It was an idea so audacious, so bold, that it made my breath catch. Catherine thought she had broken me. She had destroyed the symbol of my mother's gentle love, but she had no idea about the legacy of my grandmother's strength. I stood up, my movement suddenly filled with a purpose that hadn't been there moments before. Chloe hung up the phone, her eyes wide with worry. Dad is on his way up. He's furious. Eleanor, what are we going to do? I looked at her, and for the first time since I unzipped that bag, a smile, a real, determined smile, touched my lips. Get my suitcase, I said, my voice steady and firm. Catherine wanted to ruin my mother's dress. Fine. She succeeded. She thinks she's won. She thinks I'll walk down that aisle with a pinned-up, tragic-looking gown, a pitiful sight for all her guests to whisper about, or that I'll break down and cancel everything. But she's about to learn that she didn't just marry her son off to a quiet, agreeable girl. She's about to meet her match. Chloe stared at me, her confusion slowly melting away as she saw the new light in my eyes. She didn't understand yet, but she saw the shift. The victim was gone. The bride was back. And she had a new plan, not just to get married, but to deliver a message to Catherine, one that would be as sharp and unforgettable as the blades of her scissors. Chloe, bless her heart, didn't question me. She simply nodded, her loyalty absolute, and hauled my large suitcase onto the bed. Together, we reverently lifted the tissue-wrapped bundle from its nest of clothes. As my fingers unwrapped the layers, the silk of my grandmother's dress felt cool and smooth, like liquid starlight. It was a complete departure from my mother's dress. Where my mother's gown was soft, romantic, and innocent, this one was unapologetically glamorous. It was the dress of a woman who knew her own mind, a woman who commanded a room. As I slipped it on, it felt like a second skin. My mother and I shared a similar build, but I had my grandmother's height. The dress, which would have been a touch long on my mother, was the perfect length for me, the silk pooling ever so slightly at my feet in a small, elegant train. The low back was a statement, a declaration of confidence. It wasn't the dress I had dreamed of, but in that moment, it felt like the dress I was meant to wear. It was armor. My father arrived, his face a thundercloud. He was a quiet man, but his anger was a formidable force. He took one look at the butchered dress, then at me, standing tall in the silk gown, and his expression softened into one of pure, unadulterated pride. Your grandmother would have loved this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He walked over and gently touched my arm. She would have been so proud of you, Eleanor. Not just for wearing her dress, but for not letting anyone steal your joy. He didn't need to say Catherine's name. We both knew. He held up the shredded hem of my mother's dress. I will handle this, he said, his voice low and firm. After the ceremony, I will have a conversation with Catherine, and I will be showing her this. She will know that we know. I shook my head. No, Dad, not yet. My own plan was solidifying, becoming clearer by the second. Let her think she got away with it. Let her sit in that front pew expecting to see me looking pathetic and broken. I want her to feel the full impact of her failure. The victory will be mine, not hers. My father looked at me, a glimmer of his late wife's fiery spirit shining in my eyes, and he smiled. It was a conspiratorial smile, a pact between us. All right, he said. We do it your way. Chloe had worked her magic, adjusting my hair and makeup to complement the new, more sophisticated style of the dress. The soft, romantic curls were swept up into a chic, low chignon. The makeup became a little bolder, a classic red lip that felt like war paint. When she was done, the woman looking back at me from the mirror was not the girl who had cried over a ruined dress. She was a queen. It's time, Chloe whispered, her eyes shining. Walking towards the ceremony felt different now. The knot of dread in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, humming resolve. The gentle melody of the string quartet grew louder as we approached the grand doors of the hall. Through the small glass panes, I could see the guests, all standing and turned in anticipation. I could see Liam at the altar, looking handsome and slightly nervous, and I could see Catherine in the front row. She was wearing a pale silver dress, a picture of serene maternal elegance. Her hands were clasped in her lap, and she wore a small, almost imperceptible smirk. It was a look of smug satisfaction. She was waiting for the show. She was waiting for the wounded bride to limp down the aisle in a butchered gown, a public testament to her power and my humiliation. My father squeezed my hand. Ready? He asked. More than ready, I replied, my voice clear and steady. The large wooden doors swung open. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. It wasn't a gasp of pity, but one of awe. Every head turned. Every eye was on me. I saw Liam's face, his jaw slack with surprise, his eyes widening in adoration. He had seen my mother's dress, of course, but this was a revelation. But I wasn't looking at Liam. My eyes were locked on one person and one person only, Catherine. I watched her face as I began to walk down the aisle. The smug smirk faltered, her brow furrowed in confusion. This wasn't the dress. This wasn't the plan. I saw her eyes dart from my face to the sleek silk of the gown, to the elegant train gliding behind me. I saw the moment of dawning comprehension, the slow, chilling realization that her vicious little act of sabotage had not only failed, but had backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. The color drained from her face. Her carefully constructed composure shattered, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. She went pale, a stark, sickly white against her silver dress. She looked like she had seen a ghost. And in a way she had. The ghost of a woman whose strength she had severely underestimated. I kept my gaze fixed on Catherine for a few moments longer, letting her absorb the full, undiluted reality of her failure. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement. I know what you did, and you have lost. Then, I turned my attention to the man I was about to marry. The love and wonder in Liam's eyes washed over me, cleansing the last remnants of Catherine's poison. He took my hand, his grip warm and firm, a reassuring anchor in the whirlwind of the last few hours. Eleanor, he breathed, his voice a mixture of awe and confusion. You look. I don't have words. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I love you, I whispered back, and in that moment, it was the only truth that mattered. The officiant began to speak, the familiar words of the ceremony wrapping around us like a warm blanket. But while I listened and participated, a part of my awareness remained on the front row. I could feel Catherine's stare like a physical pressure. She had rearranged her face back into a mask of polite indifference, but it was a brittle facade. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the small, beaded purse in her lap. Her smile was a tight, painful slash of lipstick. She was trapped, forced to sit and watch as the son she had tried to control pledged his life to the woman she had tried to break. When it came time for the vows, Liam went first. His words were heartfelt and beautiful, full of promises of a shared future, of laughter and support. He spoke of his admiration for my kindness and my spirit. As he spoke, I felt a pang of guilt that our day had been marred by such ugliness, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of resolve. Our marriage would not be defined by his mother's toxicity. It would be defined by the strength we were already showing. Then it was my turn. I had memorized my vows, words I had written weeks ago about love and partnership. But as I looked at Liam, with the ghost of my grandmother's strength wrapped around me and the memory of my mother's desecrated dress fresh in my mind, new words came to me. Liam, I began, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. I came here today expecting to wear a symbol of my mother's gentle love, but instead I am wearing a symbol of my grandmother's strength, and it has taught me something. It has taught me that love isn't just about the gentle moments. It's about resilience. It's about facing unexpected cruelty and choosing joy anyway. It's about standing tall when others try to cut you down. I saw a flicker of confusion in Liam's eyes, but he remained focused on me, listening intently. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Catherine flinch, her posture becoming even more rigid. I promise to love you with that same strength, I continued, my gaze locked with Liam's. I promise to build a home with you that is a fortress of honesty, trust, and unwavering support. I will be a partner you can always depend on, who will face any storm with you, and who will never, ever let darkness win. I promise to cherish the legacy of the amazing women who came before me, and to build a future with you that is worthy of their honor. I love you with all that I am, and all that I am meant to be. The silence in the hall was profound. The guests were moved, and Liam's eyes were shining with tears. He understood the love, if not the specific context. But Catherine understood. Every word had been a perfectly aimed dart, and I knew they had all hit their mark. The exchange of rings felt like the sealing of a sacred pact. When the officiant finally declared, "You may now kiss the bride," Liam pulled me into a dip, his kiss full of passion and promise, and the room erupted in applause. The sound was deafening, a wave of pure joy that washed over the entire hall, drowning out the single, silent note of hatred emanating from the front row. As we walked back up the aisle, hand in hand, beaming at our friends and family, we passed Catherine. She was on her feet like everyone else, clapping mechanically. Her face was a grotesque parody of happiness. As I passed, our eyes met for a fraction of a second. The look in hers was no longer shock. It was pure, unadulterated fury, and I met it with a radiant smile. Once we were tucked away in a small antechamber, waiting for the guests to move to the reception area, Liam framed my face with his hands. "Ellie, that was the most powerful thing I have ever heard. But you have to tell me. What happened? Where is your mother's dress?" I placed a gentle finger on his lips. "It's a story for later, my love," I said softly. "A story that involves strength and legacy and a pair of scissors. But for right now, we are husband and wife. Let's not let anything or anyone take this moment from us." I smiled, and he smiled back, content for now to simply be in the moment with his new wife. The battle was won, but the war, I knew, was not yet over. The reception was still to come. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. The joy in the room was palpable, a living entity that swelled with the music and the clinking of glasses. For a few wonderful hours, I allowed myself to be swept up in it completely. Liam and I had our first dance, my silk dress moving with me like it was part of me, and in his arms, I felt invincible. Friends and family told me over and over again how stunning I looked, how the dress was a work of art. Not a single person seemed to remember the quaint vintage dress I was supposed to wear. The memory of it had been completely eclipsed by the reality of this one. Catherine, however, moved through the celebration like a phantom. She wore her mask of the proud mother of the groom, but her eyes were like chips of ice. She couldn't stand the joy. She couldn't stand seeing me radiant, seeing Liam so happy, seeing her spiteful plan result in my ultimate triumph. I knew she was waiting for her moment, a chance to reclaim the narrative. It came during the speeches. My father went first, giving a loving tribute to my mother and speaking of how proud she would have been. Then it was Catherine's turn. She stepped up to the microphone, her smile brittle. "I have always wanted the best for my Liam," she began, her voice smooth as honey laced with arsenic. "And I see today that he has found a wife with a great many surprises." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "When Eleanor first showed me the dress she planned to wear, a family heirloom, I was touched by the sentiment. We all were. I am as surprised as anyone to see her in this rather theatrical gown instead. One can only hope that this marriage is not as prone to last-minute changes as the bridal attire." A nervous titter went through the crowd. The barb was subtle enough to be deniable, but sharp enough for everyone to feel its sting. It was a direct challenge. Liam tensed beside me, finally sensing the malice he had been blind to for so long. He started to stand up, but I put a hand on his arm, keeping him seated. I gave him a look that said, "Let me handle this." This was the moment. She had opened the door and I was going to walk right through it. Later, as Liam and I were making our rounds, I saw Catherine holding court near the gift table, no doubt spinning her own version of events to a captive audience of her relatives. My father caught my eye from across the room and gave me a slight nod. It was time. I excused myself from Liam, promising to be right back, and walked toward my father, who met me halfway. In his hands, he held a discreet, elegant gift box. Inside, I knew, was the shredded, hacked-off hem of my mother's dress. "Dad, can you do me a favor?" I asked quietly. "I need you to bring Liam over to the bridal suite in about 5 minutes. Don't tell him why, just tell him I need him." He nodded, understanding completely. "It will be done." I turned and walked toward Catherine. The small group around her fell silent as I approached. Catherine herself looked up, her expression one of wary condescension. "Eleanor," she said coolly. "Enjoying the party?" "Immensely," I replied, my voice calm and even. "Catherine, could I borrow you for a moment? There's something I'd like to show you privately, in the bridal suite." Her eyes narrowed. She was suspicious, but she couldn't refuse without causing a scene. "Very well," she said, forcing another tight smile. She excused herself from her relatives and followed me out of the reception hall. The walk to the suite was silent and heavy with unspoken hostility. When we entered the room, the first thing I did was retrieve the garment bag from the armoire. I unzipped it and held up the desecrated dress for her to see. Her composure didn't crack, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Triumph. "I just wanted you to see the full extent of your handiwork," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "Did you enjoy it? Did it make you feel powerful, sneaking in here and destroying my mother's memory with a pair of scissors?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. Perhaps the old fabric simply disintegrated. It was very old, after all. "Oh, it was old," I agreed. "It was old and precious, and it was an heirloom, just like the one I wore instead. The dress that belonged to my grandmother, a woman who, I'm told, did not suffer fools gladly." Just then, the door opened, and Liam walked in, my father just behind him. Liam's eyes went from my face to his mother's, then to the ruined dress I was holding. His expression was one of profound confusion. "Ellie, what's going on? Mom?" he asked. Catherine immediately went on the offensive. "Liam, thank goodness. Eleanor is making the most absurd accusations. She's hysterical. She's blaming me for her dress falling apart." I said nothing. I simply looked at my husband, and then I nodded toward my father. My dad stepped forward and opened the gift box he was holding. He reached inside and pulled out the jagged, shredded, undeniably cut pieces of the hem. He laid them on the table for Liam to see. The truth dawned on Liam's face in a slow, sickening wave. He looked at the hacked lace. He looked at his mother's stony, defiant face. And he looked at me, standing tall in my grandmother's dress, and understood the subtext of my vows. He finally understood everything. "You did this," he said to Catherine. His voice was quiet, but it was filled with a terrible, final weight. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Catherine's face crumpled. The facade, the lies, the years of manipulation, it all dissolved in an instant, revealing the ugly, bitter woman beneath. "She's not right for you, Liam. She's not from our world. I did it for you." "No," Liam said, shaking his head, his heartbreak and disillusionment palpable. "You did it for you this whole day. You tried to ruin it. For you." He took a step back from her, a chasm opening between them that I knew would never be closed. He walked over to me, took my hand, and stood by my side, presenting a united front. Catherine stared at our joined hands, and in that moment she knew she had not only lost the battle, but the entire war. She had not cut me out of the family. She had cut herself out. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room, her reign of terror finally over. My father quietly disposed of the ruined pieces and left us alone. Liam pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me, and he just held me. "I am so sorry, Ellie," he whispered into my hair. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it." I held him tighter. "You see it now," I said. "We see it now, and we're stronger for it." We stood there, not as a bride and groom, but as husband and wife, our marriage forged not in a fire of disaster, but in the crucible of resilience. We had faced the worst and had chosen each other. Our story is not about a ruined dress. It's about the threads of strength that run through generations, the love that can be passed down like a precious gown. It's a reminder that even when others try to tear us down, we have the power to weave a new story, one of courage, dignity, and a love that refuses to be broken. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message of hope.